Hi, my name is Maya,
My name is Carolina. Welcome back to another episode of Mic Check.
where we drop the mic. And in today's episode, we will be talking to the wonderful Ms Pearson about how she adapted to online learning. Who are you? Introduce yourself. What have you been up to lately? Anything interesting?
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Annalie Pearson. I am a world history teacher here at South Pass. There is another Pearson, a far better Pearson than me, but she's the AP Bio teacher. And I have been a social studies and world history teacher my entire adult life. I've been with the district now for, gosh, is it 13 years? But I've been teaching nearly 20 years. This is my 20th year teaching.
And going into teaching, how have you had to adapt throughout this year as well as the previous 3-week break that we had in the start of the quarantine?
Okay, so if we want to kind of start talking specifics, well, first of all, how I go into teaching, I think is the same way that I would go into teaching any year. I really do believe that my thoughts and my mind has to be right? So I go into this year like every other year, confident and believing the best in people, going into each day with a good attitude. And I know that's really corny, but if you've had me before and I've shared stories with you guys, I really do believe that the mind is just super powerful in that way. So I've actually had a wonderful year. I know that most teachers would probably, I don't know, say something maybe not as bold as that, but I've had a really great year. I've had what I have enjoyed in the past 20 years of teaching. I've had really great students. Clearly, my interaction has been much more limited. And since you guys both had me, you know how much of a spaz I am in the classroom, jumping around, while talking and that. I mean, I don't know if you guys can remember how many times I've actually sat down at my desk during the normal school year. So this has definitely been an absolute and total drastic change for me to be confined to a one-dimensional flat screen where I have to be sedentary and sitting and not being able to pat someone on the back or give them a hug or greet them as they walk in the door. So it has definitely been a little bit of a change. Last spring, it's almost been a year ago, Caro, if you remember our last Latinx meeting where we were like talking about, hey guys, this might happen, or, we kind of felt it in the air. I don't know if you guys remember with Leo, Maya in third period, kind of talking about coronavirus, and we didn't know what was going on. We were so innocent then. And it was a year ago when all that kind of happened abruptly. And so to no fault or credit to anybody, I don't know, it came to a very shocking sort of end. Sorry, it says my internet's unstable. I don't know why nobody's on anymore. But anyway, so it came to a kind of a shocking, abrupt halt. And we were just kind of waiting. No one really knew how it would progress. So we didn't get much direction or directives in terms of how to approach things. The one thing we were kind of told is that we were not allowed to hold class meetings like we are now on Zoom. We weren't allowed to do that. We weren't allowed to have lectures. And so I think there was kind of miscommunication, because I know that some students expressed to me just informally off camera their frustration of not being able to contact teachers and why weren't we having classes at that point. But in all fairness, the school and the district kind of gave that direction that we weren't allowed to. And if you guys think about it in terms of equity, it's because in March, since we were ill-equipped for this, they couldn't ensure that everybody had a computer. They couldn't necessarily ensure in an instant that everybody had internet access. So it took some planning, and it took a little bit of time to really kind of have a plan. So that was really difficult, I thought, because it was just such an abrupt and nasty, gnarly sort of end to what would have, I think, been probably some of the most fun times, is really at the end of the year, once everybody's acclimated and everyone's so close. So that was really, really tough and difficult, especially not being able to, quote unquote, force students to meet with us. So what we've now been accustomed to this year, if you guys remember back to March, like we didn't even talk to you guys. We just posted things on Google Classroom. It was just the most, I don't know what the words would be. It was just very much through Google Classroom that we would communicate. So we didn't really communicate at all. I didn't really get to say bye anyone, not that that matters, but just in terms of how that year went. And I'm sure that a lot of students probably had a similar sort of unsettling feeling. In terms of this year, it has been dramatically different in my opinion, dramatically better than what obviously the spring, what we did in the spring. But I'm very realistic, as optimistic as I can be, and I try to be. I'm also very realistic. I feel that my role as a teacher is heavily influenced as my role as a parent to two teenagers at South Pass. So um, I hear firsthand the difficulties and challenges that come with distance learning, and I really do try to account for that in my expectations of my students. It doesn't mean that we kind of say, "Oh, well, it's a pandemic, let's not learn anything." Obviously, we stay true to the integrity of the curriculum. But for me this year, what I've really tried to do is focus, and I do this anyway. I would hope to think that teachers don't give busy work or whatever, but you really try to focus on simply the essentials, right? And while somehow, some way, um, creating a rapport with students, which is incredibly difficult. And it's what really I kind of value most, is really the relationships. Um, Interestingly enough, remember I was telling you guys I just came from seventh period. I feel closest probably to my seventh period. It sucks to have in seventh period. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't like it. I didn't want it. I wasn't happy about it, but so be it. It was, I was called to do it. But what's interesting? It's actually turned into a blessing that I feel really close to my seventh. I see them every day. Think about that. And then I always tell them, you don't get a chance to get too tired of me because it's such a short period, you know? So that's been interesting. And that was a mouthful. I don't know. Do you guys have any questions about what I said? Did I make sense?
Yeah, you made a lot of sense. And kind of intertwining those two things together, you also overlook Tassel and Latinx Student Union. So have you had to adapt differently to the club process, or do you
Hmm.
hold the same like ideals for teaching?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also been kind of difficult. In March, we really kind of, I feel like we abandoned everything just because we were all just really blindsided by this pandemic. But with some time, um, I keep saying to myself, and I don't know what you guys think about this, the last thing I want to do on a normal day is yet do another Zoom. But in reality, it's the only way for us to safely participate in, in any sort of kind of community event is really through Zoom. So I kind of grappled with the idea of how are we going to approach this? Luckily, I've had some really great officers this year who've had some ideas. And I do think that as much as I shy away from having to force someone to go on the computer, even half an hour longer in meetings, I do believe that it's really in the connecting is what is most efficient in our everyday lives since this pandemic started. So it's with that I decided we're going to go forward with it, even if it's a every other week, bi-weekly sort of meeting, even if it's only a 20-minute Zoom meeting. I think it's important just to have a sense of community. It's been challenging for sure. I don't know if the numbers have dwindled completely. Usually, if you guys remember in my classroom, it was pretty packed during around that when we had lunches. And now again, I don't know the exact numbers, but I definitely see fewer people participating, and rightfully so. No judgment at all. I mean, it's difficult to have to force yourself to yet do another Zoom, but I do find it very valuable. Just this past month, we had the officers for the Latinx Student Union organizing a drive for organization that they chose. I think it was Sofia Nava who brought it to the table, for Casa de Alegría, which is that transitional home for females that have been that have suffered through domestic abuse and homelessness. So just being able to do that and being out in front of the school has been cool. It's been very, very difficult because just kind of in my nature to be, to hug and all that. It was really nice though. And as far as Tassel goes, I mean, I take absolutely no credit for the amazing organization that they are. I've always said this. I think I've said this in multiple interviews, whether it was for Tiger or whatever, but I've said they run like a well-oiled machine. Like they are like a Fortune 500 company that can run themselves. They are so disciplined and they are so organized and structured that they really have kind of run themselves. The Latinx Student Union is a little bit more organic and still in its infancy, newborn stage, where I think there has to be a lot more oversight. That and the fact that I feel that there's a real place for me in terms of a resource and mentorship for that kind of organizations. So my roles are a little bit different for both, but they've both equally made me just as proud, and it's been great. I mean, clearly, let's just be honest, realistic. It's not as good, I think, as being able to listen to music as we walk into my classroom together, people microwaving, eating snacks, banter, playing loteria, talking. I mean, it's not the same, but I mean, we're making do.
And like with the loss of all this interaction and like in-person conversation, are there any funny moments over Zoom that you have like laughed over or talked about in class?
You know, what's funny is I kept trying to think. Thankfully, I can't think of one major thing. So that means there's probably not a major embarrassing moment that I've had. I mean, every day it's kind of silly. I don't know. Again, kind of just me and my personality spazzing, singing while they're entering into the classroom. But nothing crazy. I have heard some, I don't know if they're funny moments, but horrifying moments of like people, dad in the background with underwear or something like that. Thankfully we haven't had any of that, but it has been, it's kind of embarrassing just because my husband's an educator, tried doing PE with 80 students on Zoom. So he works at a different district, so I have him in one room, and then I have EJ in another room for Monterey Hills, and DJ in another room for Monterey Hills, and Leah another room for not for Monterey Hills, for our high school. So I think the most embarrassing thing is getting kicked. I don't know, the lagging of my bandwidth. If anybody feels me on that, we just have a lot of people on, so maybe a little bit of arguing between the kids, or banter, yelling, or me constantly saying, "Hey, shut up! I'm giving a lecture," something like that. But nothing too crazy. How about you guys? Have you guys had crazy stuff? I know it's I'm the interviewee, but I'm curious. Do you guys have anything funny?
Oh, okay. Well, I was playing guitar once in ASB just because I had to like fiddle with something and my mic was on. And it was really embarrassing, but whatever.
And you didn't know, so it was obviously, it wasn't planned.
No, I was just
Okay.
trying to fiddle and my mic was on.
It was a jam session. How about you, Maya? Anything funny? I want to know these things.
I had something embarrassing with myself. I was in a breakout room for math. So I work in my garage, and we took out the regular door that like goes up.
Okay.
Put in a glass sliding door, so that's why the light.
Oh wow.
Good.
Oh, I see.
And I was like, it was raining, and it's like pretty to see it, and so I was like, I'm gonna take a video, but I have a really bad chair, and it wobbles. So as I was trying to take the video, I fell back in my chair in my break.
In front of everyone in the breakout. Oh, that's too funny. That is so funny. Was everybody cracking up?
Yeah, it was funny. Like everyone was laughing.
And you were okay, so that was
yeah,
fun.
I was laughing too. It was mutual.
I would love to hear those kind of stories. That would be great. I've heard a few teacher kind of horror stories, like I said, like where they're embarrassed for people, but nothing crazy funny. Yeah, but sorry, no, so boring. I can't believe it. Just the casual mom, me like yelling at kids. I guess that's pretty embarrassing, but whatever.
And then going more on a general note, how has you and your family adapted to working online, going off from what we're saying?
There have been some definitely there's been some more difficult times throughout this time. So when people ask me how I am, again, this is not just a reflexive reaction. I feel very blessed and feel very fortunate, because I know that the experience that we've had is probably better than a lot of people. The fact that I still have a job when a lot of people don't during the pandemic, the fact that I have a home, the fact that I have internet, the fact that I have food, So when people ask me how have I been doing over this pandemic, I've been blessed. I mean, I really can't complain, but there have definitely been challenges. I actually saw a lot more without oversharing. I've actually seen a lot of the effects on my youngest child, I would say. He's in 5th grade at Monterey Hills, and he was having some mental health issues in regards to completely and totally severing ties. And mind you, we live far from South Pass, so even the everyday interaction of, thankfully, that a lot of you guys get to have, maybe going for a safe walk with a friend, or to the park with a friend, or bike ride with a friend, we don't really have that experience for our kids. So especially with him, whereas our older kids, they still talk on the phone or play video games, or or maybe do something safe, like go to the beach, something outdoors where they can be safe with their friends. Really, for our youngest, it's not necessarily the case. So that's been a little bit challenging. He seems to be doing better. Again, we just kind of try to implement all the strategies that we know as people, as parents, as we read. Again, no one really has a manual on how to successfully go through a pandemic, but as you know, as we've experienced more, we've really tried to adjust. So I would say there have been periods of time where there's been challenges amongst our family members. My husband, who's a coach, a football coach and a PE teacher. I mean, his whole life has been upside down because in reality, his whole livelihood and his whole life experience being a lifelong educator has always been outdoors. So his personality type, as you can imagine, to be put indoors is it doesn't necessarily go with being confined to four walls. So there's definitely been challenges, but overall, I mean, this is not just a corny, cliche response. I feel fortunate, right? I just constantly keep in perspective how we, despite our challenges, are just need to be grateful for everything that we do have, because there are people who have it far worse. But overall, I mean, great, honestly, and that's not just an understatement. I'm very, very blessed to have my family healthy. We thankfully, in our immediate family, at least, there hasn't been anybody who has been ill. We have known friends and family members that have gotten sick with COVID and have died from COVID. So, like I said, if the worst is that we have to struggle together within these four walls, the way that I think about this, you guys, is, and it's hard, especially for a teenager. And I get that, because I think of myself at that age, but I have to keep reminding myself this is not going to be forever. As hard as it is to think long term, right? Short term, this is not ideal, but long term, this will end. Today's test actually is on World War One. I don't know how much you guys remember from World War One, but we were talking about the Great Flu during World War One. You talk about how many people were affected. 20 million people or something died as a result of that. And you think to yourself how horrible, how miserable, how sad the people that all had to suffer through that. But there is an end, right? And so I just constantly try to remind myself there will be an end to this. There will be an end to this. So that's just kind of my experience. I don't know about you guys.
I think, speaking for Karen and I think we definitely both are on the fortunate end of things. So yeah, to remember to keep that in perspective is something that I think I need to remind myself more often. But just to conclude with our final question, do you have any advice for high school students on how to manage online school?
Oh, again, I have kind of a twofold insight in terms of a teacher and a parent. But on the teacher end, I think that's something that's really important, especially during online school, is to maintain communication with your teachers, which is completely and totally awkward. I know, especially maybe not having met someone, and some people who already maybe are socially awkward, and then they're put into this whole other element where now they have to physically unmute themselves to be heard or something. But it is so important for students to communicate with teachers, and whether it's, and I tell my students, look, I understand that that's a long button to press. It's a hard button to press to unmute yourself on Zoom. But even if you stayed behind as other people log off, maybe to express a concern or a circumstance or ask a question, or if worst case scenario, email a teacher. Clearly, I think the instant question or interaction with a student and teacher is ideal, just because I'm sure you guys have this experience too with the pandemic. Your inbox grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, right? Just with how many emails we get a day from various things, whether it's a Google alert or whatever it is. But my number one tip is to communicate with teachers, I think, because I think most teachers are, I mean, obviously all teachers are also in this predicament and can understand circumstances and situations that might require more attention. So I think that is very important. I also think that just reminding yourself, and again, just to kind of repeat what I said, but it's so true, just reminding yourself this is not forever. It's a little different, and it gets really challenging when you start talking about seniors and this being their final experience in high school, which is also obviously very sad. But um, in the big scheme of things, just reminding yourself that um, this is short term. This will also come to an end soon. I think taking care of yourself is probably the best thing that tip I can give anyone, because if you're not okay, I mean, how would you ever perform well in school? I don't know. I don't know if that's much of a tip in terms of just a parent. Um, how can you manage online school? You still have to, you got to try to move away from online stuff. And you hear that all the time, but my kids are the first to bury themselves in a YouTube video or social media or whatever it is. But we're so glued to this that I just can't see that being totally positive, which has been, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this yet or are going to try to do sports, but something that I've seen in the few weeks that sports has kind of resumed at school is I feel like it's helping my own kids, right? Just because our body and mind and everything is just so interconnected. I think a big tip to managing online school, it doesn't sound very insightful, but you actually have to get outside and just as safely as possible. We're I don't think we're creatures that are made to be recluses and staying indoors. Getting outside, even if it's for a walk, not even just sports, but a walk or whatever it is, I think is really, really important. So yeah, sorry, not super insightful. Probably the same thing that anybody else would say if you ask them the same question. Oh, I know what I can tell you. I can say this. Here's my final thing. I don't know if you want to record this. You guys can edit this out later if not. But something I was going to say was, I think this idea of what are, because we're indoors, because we're at home most of the time, we become even more so kind of prisoners of our thoughts, and those thoughts can either be really good or bad. And I was just talking about this to someone, and I said, every day there's a reason for you to have a bad day. This sounds bad, but every day there's a reason for you to have a bad day. There's a reason for you to be angry. There's a reason for you to be sad. Just the way the world is and what we've kind of gone through, and maybe people that that have really suffered. But in the same fashion, this sounds stupidly optimistic, but I promise this is what I try to live by. In the same way, there's a reason to be upset every day. There's also a reason to be happy every day. And the question is, what do you allow your mind to focus on? So this sounds weird, but think about what you're thinking about, right? So do a real check on you. What are your thoughts? Because our thoughts affect our actions, and our actions affect our entire well-being. So I would say do a sincere inventory check. What are you thinking about? What is your mind on most of the day, and what affects your thoughts? So if it is, for example, not saying that this is true or not, but let's say we do spend too much time on our screens, maybe we then change our behavior and not use this so much. So then maybe our thoughts could change, and ultimately our well-being and our mind and our body and all of that. So not to sound too self-help, but that's honestly the truth. I was just talking about this to a student the other day. And to anyone out there who I have or don't have, again, virtual hugs, and I can't wait to see you guys when we're out on the other end of this. So much love to all of you guys. So it's with that, sorry, so boring. I'm so not interesting. I'm sorry, you guys. But this is after day full of testing, just saying.
I would like to take the thumbnail photo.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3.